In 776 BCE, the first recorded Olympic Games turned a narrow strip of packed earth in Olympia into something that could cause rivalries that normally ended in blood. The Olympics were not born as entertainment first. They were born as a sacred agreement. A festival only works if people believe the rules are real and the ground is neutral. This cold open shows the system at its simplest. Travel routes, judges, athletes, and a truce that turns enemies into spectators. When everyone accepts the same finish line, they start sharing the same story. Olympia sat in a valley that belonged to the gods more than to any single city. That mattered because Greeks did not have one king or one capital. They had hundreds of proud communities, and pride makes compromise hard. A neutral sanctuary solves a political problem by turning it into a religious one. If Zeus owns the ground, nobody else gets to. Olympia's stories linked the games to Zeus, the ultimate referee in the Greek imagination. Myths were not just bedtime tales, they were legitimacy machines. If the games were Zeus's festival, cheating became more than unfair, it became sacrilege. That belief made rules feel heavier than any spear. Systems last longer when they plug into something people fear to offend. Greeks loved heroes who proved themselves through trials, not titles. Heracles-style stories taught that strength should be tested in public and measured by shared standards. That's what sport does. It turns raw power into a contest with a start and a finish. The Olympic Games took that hero logic and made it a repeating institution. Instead of one legend, every 4 years created new ones. Another myth tied Olympia to chariots, speed, and dangerous ambition. Chariots were elite technology, expensive horses, skilled drivers, and wealthy sponsors. That mattered because the games needed rich cities to care about them. Myth gave elites a reason to show up and spend money while claiming it was for the gods. A festival is easier to fund when prestige feels sacred. The first recorded Olympic victor became a timestamp for Greek history, because early Olympiads were remembered through winners, not paperwork. Recording winners turns a one-time event into a calendar anchor. Once you can say, before that victor and after that victor, the games become timekeeping for a whole culture. Judges protect that record by making results trustworthy. Memory is power, and the Olympics built a shared memory bank. Sanctuaries had boundaries, physical and psychological. Inside them, behavior changed, oaths mattered, violence was restrained, and disputes could be redirected into ritual. The altar's grove was a technology of peace, built from belief. This is how religion can act like law when law is fragmented. The games depended on that emotional boundary. A repeating schedule is the backbone of any institution. 4 years is long enough for anticipation to build and short enough that people remember the last winners. It also aligns with training cycles. Bodies, not paperwork, set the pace. A predictable rhythm lets cities plan travel and politics around the festival. The Olympics became a cultural heartbeat. The olive wreath was intentionally simple. It prevented the games from becoming an auction where the richest athlete always wins. A crown made of leaves says the real prize is honor, timeless and hard to fake. That simplicity also made the reward portable. You could carry it home like proof. In a world of rival cities, proof matters. Once travelers started arriving from far away, Olympia changed. Crowds attract merchants, merchants attract services, and services make travel easier. That's the feedback loop of a successful festival. The games slowly became pan-Hellenic, a place where Greeks from different dialects still recognized the same gods and rules. The magnet grew stronger each cycle. By the end of Act 1, the essential ingredients are in place: a neutral sacred stage, a repeating schedule, and a prize that signals legitimacy. What's missing is unity, because Greece is still a patchwork of rivals. The Olympics won't erase rivalry, but they can redirect it. The next act shows why a divided world needed a shared competition so badly. When politics can't unite you, ritual sometimes can. Ancient Greece was a web of city-states, each with its own laws, pride, and enemies. People could share language and gods while still fighting wars. That's the core tension. Shared culture, divided politics. The Olympics mattered because they created a rare common room for a fragmented civilization. A system can unify behavior without unifying government. The hoplite phalanx trained citizens to cooperate shoulder to shoulder. That discipline shaped how Greeks thought about honor, not just being brave but being reliable. Athletic training borrowed that logic. Repeat drills, master form, trust rules. The same culture that built battle lines also built race lines. The Olympics turned competitive aggression into measured performance. Greek colonies spread across the Mediterranean, linked by ships and trade. Travel created opportunity but also misunderstanding and competition. Pan-Hellenic festivals helped far-flung Greeks feel connected to a shared identity. Olympia became a place where Greekness could be performed and recognized. Networks of trade quietly supported networks of ritual. Greeks disagreed about politics but agreed on many sacred stories. That agreement is valuable because it creates common expectations. Judges could say, "This is Zeus's rule," and most people would listen. Religion provided the enforcement layer that city-states couldn't. The Olympics used shared belief as glue. To attend the games, you had to cross mountains, pass hostile borders, and risk bandits. A festival without safe travel is just a local party. The Olympics solved that with the truce, but the truce only works if cities respect it. That respect is a negotiation every cycle. Safety is a policy decision disguised as tradition. Olympia wasn't alone. Other festivals also created Pan-Hellenic meeting points. Together, they formed a circuit that standardized what honor looked like. If multiple sanctuaries reward similar virtues, strength, discipline, piety, those virtues spread. Culture becomes consistent without a central government. The Olympics were the loudest signal in that network. Cities cared about reputation as much as territory. A victory at Olympia could elevate a city's prestige without firing an arrow. That's why elites invested in athletes and coaches. The games offered a safer way to win against rivals. When reputation is measurable, competition finds peaceful outlets. Neutrality is fragile. One incident can convince cities that the sanctuary is biased, and then the whole system collapses. So the Olympics had to be visibly fair. Clear judges, clear procedures, and public outcomes. Trust is the real infrastructure. The games built trust by repeating the same ritual structure again and again. The Olympics reflected ancient Greek social boundaries. Women were generally excluded from competing and in many periods from attending, with limited sacred exceptions. This wasn't a sports choice, it was a cultural rule about public honor. Understanding the games means seeing who was allowed to be visible. Institutions unify some people while sidelining others. Thousands of visitors create demand: food, lodging, oil, tools, and entertainment. Merchants made Olympia more comfortable, which increased attendance, which increased trade, another reinforcing loop. The games were a religious event, but they ran on economics. Even sacred festivals need supply chains. A thriving festival becomes a temporary city. By the end of Act 2, we see why the Olympics mattered. Rival city-states needed a shared arena to compete without destroying each other. The festival offered a controlled outlet for status, pride, and identity. But control requires preparation, rules, travel protection, and trusted judges. Next, we watch the machinery that makes the games actually happen. A sacred idea only survives if it can operate. Before you can host a Pan-Hellenic festival, you must tell the world it's happening. Heralds carried the announcement like living messages. Their routes mapped the Greek world in real time: roads, ports, and alliances. Information is the first layer of organization. Without it, the Olympics cannot scale. The truce wasn't peace everywhere. It was a targeted policy: protect travel and sanctuary space. That focus made it achievable. Cities could keep rivalries, but suspend certain actions for a limited time. The truce changed incentives. Attacking travelers now looked like offending Zeus and breaking the shared game. When incentives change, behavior follows. The Eleans controlled Olympia's administration, and that control required credibility. Organizers had to be seen as servants of the sanctuary, not of one city's ambition. Their job was practical: schedules, spaces, and disputes. In a decentralized world, administration is an act of diplomacy. Running a fair festival is a kind of governance. Olympic training wasn't casual. Athletes practiced for months, building speed, technique, and endurance like skilled artisans. This professional mindset made sport reliable. Spectators came to see excellence, not randomness. Training also spread shared methods across Greece. When athletes travel, they carry techniques like cultural seeds. Greek cities invested in training spaces because physical excellence was civic pride. A strong athlete reflected a strong community. This linked sport to politics. Cities wanted winners as proof of their values. The gymnasium became a civic machine, turning youth into reputation. The Olympics were the final exam. As visitors arrived, Olympia transformed. Camps, kitchens, and markets sprang up along sacred boundaries. Strangers from rival cities shared water, food, and gossip. This is how a shared identity forms, not through speeches, but through crowded routines. The festival made coexistence normal for a few days. A festival needs gates, even if the gates are social. Judges checked eligibility and enforced standards of participation. This wasn't modern paperwork, it was ritual authority and reputation. The goal was to make outcomes believable. Legitimacy begins before the race starts. Athletes swore oaths that framed competition as sacred. An oath turns cheating into a spiritual risk and a public shame. It also signals to spectators that the contest is not chaos. The games worked because athletes and cities agreed to be judged. Consent is the hidden engine of fairness. Events had to be ordered, timed, and repeated in ways people recognized. Scheduling is an underrated power. It decides what audiences see first and what feels most important. Repetition across cycles created tradition, and tradition created expectation. A good schedule reduces conflict because everyone knows what comes next. Predictable time is a form of peace. Olympia didn't have a modern police force, yet it maintained order through sacred rules and collective pressure. People watched each other because the festival was a shared asset. If disorder ruins the games, everyone loses the opportunity for honor. Social enforcement can be stronger than force when norms are widely believed. The sanctuary made norms feel real. By the end of Act 3, the Olympics are no longer a myth, they're a functioning machine. Announcements spread, the truce opens roads, judges prepare rules, athletes train, and Olympia fills with people. Now the only thing left is the test, events performed under pressure. In the next act, we watch bodies turn into history. One sprint can become a timestamp for a civilization. The earliest Olympics may have featured just one event, a sprint down the stadium. Simple doesn't mean small. This race was a public verdict on preparation. It was also the easiest event to understand across dialects. Fastest wins. That clarity helped the game scale. A shared rule with a clear outcome is a powerful unifier. In a sprint, the start is the whole story. A tiny, unfair advantage can ruin legitimacy. Judges had to standardize starts so people trusted the winner. This is a systems lesson. Fairness lives in procedures, not slogans. The Olympics learned that early because spectators are quick to doubt. In later Olympiads, races expanded from a sprint to longer distances. That change rewarded different bodies and different training philosophies. Endurance events also made spectators feel time. Breath, fatigue, and pacing turned the track into drama. A broader event menu pulls in more cities and more athlete types. Variety strengthens institutions. Wrestling turned strength into geometry. Leverage, balance, and timing mattered as much as muscle. That made wrestling a cultural metaphor for Greek ideals: control, skill, and discipline under pressure. Judges ensured clear victory conditions, protecting legitimacy. A fair grapple feels like justice you can see. Boxing tested toughness and composure. It also redirected aggression into a rule-bound arena, exactly what the festival needed. The point wasn't harm, it was proof of resilience. Even in hard events, the Olympics relied on consent and boundaries. A violent-looking sport can still be a peace tool when rules control it. Pancration, added later, traditionally dated to 648 BCE, blended wrestling and striking into an intense test of control. It looked chaotic, so rules mattered even more. The crowd needed to believe this wasn't a brawl, it was a contest. That difference is legitimacy. The games survived because they kept drawing that line. The pentathlon, introduced later as the festival expanded, celebrated versatility: run, jump, throw, and wrestle. It rewarded the complete athlete, a mirror of the Greek ideal citizen. Multi-event design also reduces luck. One bad moment can be recovered by excellence elsewhere. Institutions love portfolios because portfolios feel fairer. The pentathlon made athletic identity more complex and more prestigious. Throws turned private practice into visible physics. Anyone could see a clean release and a stable stance, even if they couldn't do it themselves. That visibility is educational. Festivals teach values by showing them. Technique becomes culture when crowds watch it together. The Olympics weren't just games, they were demonstrations of how Greeks should move. The ancient long jump used weights, halteres, to help rhythm and distance. To modern eyes it looks odd, but to ancient spectators it was familiar craft. The important part is the pattern. Tools plus technique create performance. Sport evolves like technology. People keep what works in their context. The Olympics preserved local innovation inside a universal festival. Chariot racing brought spectacle and wealth into the festival. Horses, equipment, and teams required resources most athletes didn't have. That meant victory often belonged to patrons and cities as much as to drivers. The games could now reward political capital directly. This is where sport and power visibly intertwine. By the end of Act 4, we've watched how many kinds of excellence can exist inside one festival. Speed, strength, skill, endurance, and spectacle all fit under the same sacred roof. That diversity made the Olympics a cultural translator. Cities could be different yet still compete. But the next question is crucial. What keeps this from becoming corruption or chaos? Act 5 is about the guardrails: rules, honor, and consequences. A massive crowd needs an accepted referee. The Hellenodikai were not just officials, they were the spine of trust. Their authority made the results real across city borders. Without trusted judges, victories become rumors and disputes become fights. Fairness is the product the Olympics sold. Greek athletics often competed nude, a practice tied to ideas of equality, discipline, and the body as civic proof. It also removed certain status markers: no armor, no rank, just performance. That matters in a world obsessed with honor. The festival shaped identity by controlling how winners looked in public. Culture is written on bodies as much as on laws. Fair contests depend on tiny rules: false starts, illegal holds, and boundary violations. These details sound boring until someone breaks them and the crowd loses faith. The Olympics treated procedure as sacred because procedure prevents escalation. Rules are the truce inside the arena. When people trust rules, they accept losing. If victory meant nothing, nobody would cheat. Cheating proves the prize is powerful. The games responded with public penalties to protect legitimacy: shame, fines, and lasting reminders. Punishment wasn't about cruelty, it was about credibility. The festival defended itself like an organism protecting its heart. Fines could fund commemorations meant to warn future athletes. These weren't trophies, they were caution signs carved in stone. Permanent reminders create long memory, and long memory changes behavior. The Olympics used architecture as enforcement. When you can't rely on police, you rely on reputation and remembrance. Oaths weren't only personal. They implicated families and cities. That connection increased social pressure to behave. When your city's prestige is attached to your conduct, you think twice before bribery. Institutions scale by distributing responsibility. The Olympics distributed it through ritual. Olympia's prize was symbolic, but home cities often rewarded winners with meals, money, or privileges. That split is clever. Olympia stays pure, while cities compete to honor winners. The result is a two-layer incentive system that keeps the festival sacred and still makes victory valuable. Systems survive when incentives are balanced. Too much money inside the sanctuary would corrode trust. Thousands of eyes can enforce behavior even when guards are few. Crowds shame cheaters, praise discipline, and spread stories fast. That social feedback is part of the rule system. The Olympics worked because spectators wanted the games to remain meaningful. In a shared festival, the crowd becomes a stakeholder. The sanctuary demanded that rival cities compete without weapons. That was not natural. It was engineered through belief and enforcement. The arena created a miniature peace treaty, repeated event after event. Repetition turns rare behavior into normal behavior. For a few days, Greeks practiced being one people. Disputes were inevitable when honor was on the line. The key was channeling anger into procedures instead of violence. Judges, sacred space, and crowd norms formed a containment system. Containment is the hidden success of the Olympics. A festival that ends without revenge is a political achievement. By the end of Act 5, we see why the Olympics endured. Legitimacy was actively maintained. Rules, oaths, penalties, and sacred boundaries protected trust. Now the festival can do something bigger than sport. It can host diplomacy, storytelling, and identity-making at scale. Act 6 zooms out to the whole machine. Religion, spectacle, markets, and politics spinning together. A race is the spark. The festival is the engine. Festival days began with movement, processions, offerings, and a shared sense of order. Processions are choreography for a society. They teach people where to look and how to feel together. When rivals walk the same path, they momentarily share a script. That shared script reduces uncertainty. Uncertainty is the fuel of conflict. Sacrifice was a communal meal and a public commitment, not just a religious act. Sharing food reinforces alliance and shared identity. It also makes the festival physically real. Everyone eats from the same event. The Olympics linked sport to the gods through these rituals. In a world of rivals, shared ritual is shared language. Feasts required supplies, grain, oil, wine, and cooking labor. That meant merchants and organizers had to coordinate like a temporary government. Logistics is how big emotions become stable reality. If people are hungry, celebrations turn into fights. The festival machine stayed peaceful partly because it kept people fed. Poets and singers turned athletic outcomes into stories that traveled home. This is how the Olympics scaled beyond Olympia, through narrative. A winner's name could echo across the sea because someone made it memorable. Storytelling also standardized values: courage, discipline, and fair victory. Culture spreads fastest when it's catchy. Olympia accumulated dedications, statues, offerings, and symbols of past victories. These objects were the festival's long-term storage device. They told new visitors, "This matters. Look how much is here." Accumulated memory increases future participation. It's a museum that grows itself. Where crowds gather safely, politics gathers too. City envoys could meet without looking weak because everyone was there for the gods. Agreements made at Olympia gain symbolic weight. Even a handshake feels stronger when it happens under Zeus's gaze. The festival provided a cover story for negotiation. Athletic victories became proxy battles for city reputation. Instead of burning farms, cities could boast about champions. That outlet doesn't eliminate war, but it changes the map of pride. Pride is a resource. The Olympics redirected how it was spent. This is competition rerouted into ritual. Even without stone seats, the stadium's hillside created a natural amphitheater. That geometry matters because it synchronizes attention. When thousands watch the same moment, their emotion aligns. Aligned emotion is powerful social glue. The Olympics use space as a tool to create unity. The truce required constant reinforcement through announcements and shared expectation. It wasn't magic. It was a contract renewed by participation. Every city that showed up signaled acceptance. That signal reduced the chance of ambush and retaliation during travel. The Olympics created a predictable corridor through an unpredictable world. Festivals also reveal inequalities. Who gets the best shade? Who can afford travel? Who is honored publicly? Olympia reflected Greek society, not an ideal fantasy. Understanding the Olympics means noticing the scaffolding: wealth, slavery, and social hierarchy behind the celebration. This is a system story, not a fairy tale. Even so, the shared festival still created real cultural unity for those inside it. By the end of Act 6, Olympia is clearly more than sport. It's a network hub. Religion legitimizes it, markets sustain it, stories broadcast it, and diplomacy exploits it. That combination makes the Olympics resilient. If one piece weakens, others keep it alive. Next, we track what happens when winners carry this power home. Victory doesn't end at the finish line, it begins there. When a judge placed the olive wreath, the athlete became more than a person. They became a symbol. That symbol could be used by families, cities, and patrons. Fame is a resource because it persuades without force. The Olympics produced fame on a schedule. Scheduled fame is a powerful political tool. Victors returned to their cities as living proof of excellence. Cities celebrated because a champion reflected on everyone. This is how individuals become propaganda without lying. The win is real. Public celebrations also teach youth what to value. A city that rewards champions is building future champions. A champion's body fades, but a song can last. Poets package victories into stories that traveled farther than the athlete ever could. This creates a feedback loop. Stories inspire training, training creates winners, winners create more stories. That loop is why the Olympics became a cultural engine. Memory is a renewable fuel. Wealthy patrons in cities dedicated statues or offerings to lock fame into stone. This was not vanity alone. It was long-term branding. Visitors saw proof that a city produced winners. Proof influences alliances and respect. Olympia became a marketplace of reputation. Elite sponsorship could turn sport into politics. Funding an athlete meant buying prestige for your family or faction. Chariot teams made this obvious because horses and equipment were expensive. Sponsorship also increased professionalism. Better resources meant higher performance. But it risked inequality. Only some could afford the path. Sparta emphasized discipline and austerity. Athens emphasized civic debate and display. Yet both could compete at Olympia under the same rules. That's the Olympics' magic. A single framework flexible enough for different identities. Competing together doesn't mean agreeing. It means accepting shared measurement. Shared measurement is the seed of unity. A city with champions could bargain from a position of confidence. Prestige affects diplomacy because humans respond to status signals. Olympia provided status signals that everyone recognized. That recognition created a common scoreboard across Greece. When status becomes measurable, politics becomes more strategic. The truce ended after the festival, and conflicts could resume. But something remained. Shared memory of lawful competition. Shared memory changes how people interpret enemies. They're rivals, but they also play our game. That nuance can reduce total hatred over time. Peace does not need to be permanent to be meaningful. Even temporary peace can reshape identity. Occasional cheating scandals tested the Olympics' credibility. The system's survival depended on response, public penalties, visible judging, and ritual reinforcement. Trust isn't the absence of failure. It's the ability to recover from failure. Olympia's institutions learned to repair trust because the stakes were enormous. A trusted festival is a shared asset. Young people watched winners and copied their training methods. That imitation spread athletic culture across the Greek world. The Olympics thus standardized behavior, similar drills, similar ideals, similar definitions of excellence. Standardization is what makes a civilization feel unified. It's hard to hate someone whose heroes look like yours. By the end of Act 7, it's clear the Olympics generate power. Not military power, symbolic power, fame, prestige, memory, and negotiation leverage. City-states tap this power to strengthen identity and influence. That's why the Games survived political storms for centuries. Now we ask the final question: what happens when the world changes? Act 8 follows the Olympics across time and into legacy. As Greece changed, new powers rising, new wars reshaping borders, the Olympics kept returning. That consistency made them feel like bedrock. The Games adapted in details, but preserved the core: sacred legitimacy, rules, and pan-Hellenic prestige. Institutions survive by being stable in purpose and flexible in form. Olympia did both. Greek culture spread farther than the city-states that created it. In a wider world, pan-Hellenic symbols became even more valuable. Olympia offered a cultural anchor, a place that said, "This is still Greek." Festivals can preserve identity when politics can't. That's why people kept making the pilgrimage. Later rulers admired Greek prestige and sometimes tried to claim it. That attention proves Olympia's value. The festival's reputation was so strong outsiders wanted in. But when power changes, incentives change, and institutions get tested. The Olympics survived because they were bigger than any one ruler. Still, every era left fingerprints. No institution is immortal. When religious priorities, resources, and political stability shifted, maintaining a massive festival became harder. Sanctuaries depend on belief and funding. If either fades, the system weakens. Olympia's stones outlasted the crowds, but the crowds were the living engine. Decline is often quiet, not dramatic. Centuries later, ruins reminded the world that the Olympic idea once bound a divided people. Archaeology and storytelling pulled the festival back into imagination. A buried stadium is like a paused sentence waiting to be read again. Rediscovery shows that institutions can outlive their original politics. Ideas can sleep and still matter. The modern Olympics are different, but the core signal echoes: shared rules, peaceful competition, and global attention. The ancient games proved that sport can be a political tool for unity, when legitimacy is protected. That lesson still matters in any age. Even now, fair measurement can turn rivals into spectators. The ancient idea survives because it solves a human problem. The first Olympic Games show how a society can unify behavior without unifying politics. A neutral sacred space created trust. The truce made travel possible. Judges protected legitimacy, and stories carried victories home. Together, those parts formed a self-reinforcing loop. Participation created prestige. Prestige created more participation. That loop is how rituals become civilization-scale institutions. If you love epic moments where one tradition changed everything, stay with Tiny Titans History. Subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Battles, myths, inventions, and turning points from every era. The past isn't dusty. It's alive when we look closely. See you in the next episode.